Welcome to PsyMood series, a podcast about mental health. We will touch on popular topics and insights from professionals from PsyMood. Welcome everyone to the third edition of Therapy Exchange. This episode is about self-labeling in mental health. Hope you enjoy. Hi everyone, welcome to Therapy Exchange number 3. Today we're going to talk about self-labeling in mental health. This is a very interesting topic. A lot of people may self-label themselves by learning a little bit of information from TikTok, social media. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? This is what we're talking about today. And I have 2 amazing specialists today, Argentina and Stephanie. Let's start with Stephanie. Stephanie, can you please tell us your name, where you're from, and a little bit of bio about yourself?
Yes, of course. So I'm Stephanie. I'm originally from Austria and moved a few years ago to Canada. Currently, I'm out west in British Columbia. I work as a therapeutic coach. I've been working in the mental field back home in Austria. And then when I moved to Canada, I started my own business. It's a therapeutic coaching. And I see clients who struggle with mental health. It's lots about addictions and anxiety, decision-making, toxic behaviors and patterns and how to change, identifying blind spots, and how to overcome life challenges.
Wonderful. And Alethia also joined, which is great. Alethia, do you want to, since said your name, would you briefly tell everybody your name, where you're from, and where you're located, and a brief bio about yourself?
Thank you, Sally. I'm sorry I can't change my name on the screen, but my name's Alethia Cadore, and I'm the CEO of Minds I Like Consulting and Community Practice. And I opened my practice in 2020. So it's been almost coming up to my 5th year, and I'm really excited about that. I'm based in Toronto, and I work with people that might be facing challenges, whether it's in their work or personal life, and it's causing them some emotional distress. So we hold space for you to address those challenges that are holding you back, develop some coping strategies so you can manage your emotions a little bit easier. And what I am introducing, which is new, is a wellness plan. How are you integrating some of those activities that help you reduce stress, build resistance, and restores your energy so you could feel better about yourself and make better decisions? It's great to be here.
Welcome. And Argentina, would you please tell us your name, yes, and where you are located, and a little bio about yourself too.
Okay. So my name is Argentina. I am a psychotherapist in Brazil. I live in São Paulo. I have some travels for some other places, live in other places, but I'm based in Brazil. I work mainly in the online psychotherapy about 5 years too, mainly with expats and immigrants. So I work more in the planning and dealing with the challenge, with the adaptations, and sometimes other challenges like relationships, difference in the company, so that I get the personal, professional, and social area too. So different challenges, but with this overview about the culture on the background, understand all these implications that being in another country can happen. And then I am developing myself in the intercultural training too. So I work with the cooperative and with expats to like preparing people to move for another country too. Yes.
Wonderful. Yeah, so like I was surprised. I looked at statistics about self-labeling, and apparently 44% of Americans, like this North America, admit to self-diagnosing their mental health condition. And I was wondering, have you guys experienced that in your therapy where people will come up to you and say, I have these issues. I think I am this, or I think I'm that. And do they ever confess where they learned that from? Anyone could start.
Yeah, so I can talk a little. So I think the one that have more people arrive and telling is the anxiety. So they really say like, oh, I have anxiety, I have a panic attack, I have anxiety crisis. And sometimes like, okay, so just go back what you really felt and how it's anxiety for yourself, because most of them really just get these words and see in the usually social media where they get and they find themselves, but not really understand deeply what's anxiety, what's the difference, or when you say like about the I would say like the normal aspects of the anxiety, and then you get the anxiety when it's dysfunctional, and then you do all this work with them. And one thing that's happening lately way more is about ADHD. It's just like a hyperactivity disorder. So this is something that's really happening a lot too, because you have a lot of influencers and a lot of people that is talking about. It's good somehow because a lot of people really seeing yourself that, but then you get the labeling aspects about, okay, as I saw that I have the same behavior or the same thought, I have it. And then when my clinical work, usually, okay, nice, you identify that. So what's the next step? What's the doctor going to see? How you're going to do the real evaluation? How we are going to evaluation this together to really identify if you're on this aspect. And it's why important to understand why you're in this frame, or you have a lot of, say, like sometimes you're just having an episode or just a symptom that's similar. So it's good that you identify and then you can work through that. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, and can totally see that also in my practice. I think it also has to do with social media. All these big words, it's like becoming more present. Like everyone suffers from anxiety, and ADHD is like every child has the ADHD, and it's like this words are being used and thrown around easily, and it might be the case, but I also think we have to be careful with going there. And also, I have the feeling oftentimes, and I also see that in my clients, we like to find something. Oh, okay, I'm this. Now I put myself into this box. I have this label, and now I understand myself better, why I'm doing what I'm doing. So sometimes it's also the case that people are just trying to find a explanation for their experiences. And I want to just open up all these possibilities, because it's like, there can be so many reasons for a lot of things going on and stressors.
Yes.
Yes, I would have to agree with the both of you. And 80% of my clients are from the Black and Black identified community. And for them, this could be the first time that they're actually getting a confirmation that there's actually something happening. And, I hear you with the labeling of making people think there's something wrong. Because what if it's something that's just happens to be right? Growing up here and having your challenges in the education system, some children get missed and they're not properly diagnosed until they become adults. And I agree with you, Stephanie, about being careful about the labeling, because sometimes we could have those symptoms that look like a classic DSM checklist. However, it could be situational, it could be circumstantial, and then, put into the factor of cultural nuances, especially if you're a newcomer or a new immigrant. Some of those things of hypervigilance, it could be based in trauma, or it could be just for that time of being adjusted to a new situation. And you might have some maladaptive behavior, but then that could, even out itself later on when you're getting used to and being acclimatized to different things. So I really like to take my time, just like it sounds like I'm hearing the both of you do, and we just work with what people describe. And then if there's something else that they need to get that's more evidence-based, then, I could refer them where they can get that official diagnosis if they need it.
Yeah.
That is perfect, because I was about to ask the next step. Yeah, because Argentina said, I don't know why ADHD in social media is crazy right now. It made me think I had ADHD. I'm like, wait, I do this. Yes. I talk over people sometimes. Yes. I bump into what? And I'm like, do I have ADHD? This is it was such an interesting thing. And then I was like, wait, I am self-labeling. And then I was like, well, I know I have to, ADHD is one of those things that you have to get diagnosed for. You can't just say you have it, because it's a more of a diagnosis that you have to get from a professional. So I guess my question is what if this person believes, I know Stephanie kind of touched upon it, if they totally believe that, I'm like, oh, I think I might have bipolar, or I have ADHD. How do you kind of train your client to say, okay, hold up, and say, maybe you don't, or do you want to explore that? I don't know. How would you guys approach that?
Yeah, I think it's the psychoeducation is the first thing. So okay, so let's go through that. So do you think you have that? So let's understand that. And then you're going to understand, and then you're going to, as she said, okay, what's the context? What more could led you to this behavior, or to these thoughts, or this situation? And then you're going to do that. And the point I said, okay, now you need to go for a further investigation with another doctor. So this was one point when can understand that. And then just adding, sometimes it's important when you have the diagnosis, because it's a freedom for someone that, for example, if the ADHD, I was just a few months ago confirmed that I have it. So it's good, not just because, because I have working through therapy, a lot of things. And then I was like, okay, I understand, but I think it's different. It's something when you have the diagnosis, it's not oh, so now I'm inside of this box. It's the opposite. It's okay, I already worked too much to do a lot of strategies to deal with that, but now I know why I needed these strategies. So this is good.
Can I add something to this, Argentina? Yeah. So it's so interesting, because I totally agree with what you're saying. So you gain this freedom, you're understanding yourself better. It's okay, that's I can work with those things. And then we have the opposite as well. I have also clients or know people. It's you know what, I'm diagnosed with this and this and this, and now that I can be different. That's the reason they use this as a shield. I cannot change. I am the way how I am, because see, I have this and this and this. And so sometimes for people, it's this freedom of knowing what it is and what can I do about it. And for other people, it gives them the permission to say how can I be different, because that's the diagnosis I have, right? And it's interesting. I also find the same thing with ADHD. I hear narcissism everywhere. Everybody's a narcissist. It's also very popular right now. And anxiety. And this is really I like to break it down to actually see what are you really struggling with before we give the baby a name, so to say. So what are those issues?
And I mean, I find myself getting easily distracted all the time. Especially when I see a shiny new thing, I'm like, ooh, a new toy, So I can understand, and I empathize when people are telling me that they find it very difficult to concentrate for long periods of time. And I think we can refer to the social media, because right now all those clips that are less than 30 seconds, they get the most views. So it seems like people just want that quick hit of dopamine.
Yes.
And when we do that, it does look like there's something else that you're not able to concentrate for long periods of time. And, you're only get focused for a certain minute, and then you switch to something else. And we do it with our conversations. I know that if I'm having an animated conversation with friends, we are switching topics at a rapid pace. And people are like, oh my gosh, I don't even know if I can keep up. And I'm like, yeah, you got to pay attention. But it doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. It's just the speed and the pace of how people exchange information and how we actually absorb and receive it. So yeah, it's so different in various spaces.
And just adding to that, when you look, it's exactly the expectations to, like, when you look for another kind of things like an anxiety or even the depression, it's like when you go through social media as everything shows so easy, as people, I think there are a lot of people that shows like how they're not good too nowadays, but they sell like how life is perfect, how I'm happy all the day, I'm so productive all the day, how I can do everything in all my areas like so perfectly. So this came exactly this kind of self-doubt too, and then brings the labeling. And even though not sure the diagnosis, but really for the self-thoughts about ourselves, about our abilities, and how about my own feelings. And then you go for like the micro idea of the labeling too.
It's really funny that you even brought up the other diagnosis, the narcissism. That is popular right now too. I feel like all these buzzwords are so popular. Like, I know there's some self-diagnosis online tests and everything. Do you guys agree with those, or like, is it a good jumpstart to kind of say, hey, I might be like, I kind of wondered if I have narcissism, and I tried a narcissist test, and it kind of was like I was almost borderline, or I might have ADHD because I went through this test. Like, do you guys like these tests, and would you recommend them, or what's your thoughts about those?
Well, there's different types of tests, and I remember taking those tests in magazines as a teen. Is your love life popping, or does your teen crush like you, and all those things. And I think they're really cute. And if it's something that gives people a little bit of a window into themselves and how they think, then great, take it for fun. But for purposes to really rely on it and to, again, self-label yourself, that's where I get a little bit concerned. You want to touch base and have a discussion about it, maybe with friends or maybe a close person that you find is very wise and insightful, because this is saying that I've always liked, and it's about the Johari windows, and sometimes we can only see two sides of ourselves when there are actually four sides, which is the other person's perception and then that other perception of ourselves. So it's always good to look at things in perspective. However, I take that for entertainment. Our personality changes depending on our age and our mood, and if we've experienced some trauma. So we really have to take that into consideration when we're looking at these surveys. Now, there is one survey that I like, and it's called the Love Languages. And I think that one by Chapman is very dynamic, because it just talks about the human and the human center, and it's all centered around oxytocin and love. So that one I would definitely want to encourage people to take that test and just see, what are your love languages? But in terms of the ones that talk about personality, I try to encourage people to look at different aspects of yourself, because we're only looking at one part. And depending on your experience in life, there's the wounded self, there's the inner child, there's all these different aspects that need healing and need love. So maybe at that time when you took the test, some of those things could have added up. But then when you step back and you have a different perspective, and you've taken some time, when you revisit the test, is it going to give you the same answers? I'm not sure, but that's something that we can always look at, because I find with different perspective and insight, we see ourselves differently.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you were saying. And I think it can give you some insights. And there's also, we always have to take everything with a grain of salt. Like you can end up in a rabbit hole and then just going down and down, like just doing like it can, you can dive really deep and it really can mess with your mind. So to be cautious and aware. And I think it's also great that we have these terms now, that we can talk about narcissism and anxiety and ADHD, that we have those wordings to actually be able to determine what's going on. So that's, I think, overall a great relief. Also with misophonia, I don't know if you have heard about misophonia. It's the hate of noises. It hasn't been, there was no term for such a long time. And quite a lot of people suffer from misophonia. And I know people, they were like, oh, finally, I'm not crazy. Like that's, this condition exists. Like other people also suffering from misophonia. It really, it is important, and also knowing like, okay, how to deal with it and how to look at it and to work with it, and knowing that, as you said just earlier, it's our personalities are also changing. Life events are happening. We are growing. We are changing. We are making our experiences, and life is not stagnant.
Yes, and I do agree. If everyone it's like this, and then when you go specific things, exactly what was said before, sometimes I start point is a kind of awareness way, and then the client can just bring you to therapy, and then you can go work through that. So it's exactly the point. It's how the person that's taking the tests is going to use this information. They're going to be curious about it, then going to a professional to really understand if this is true or not, or they're just going to get this information and just labeling themselves like, yeah, this is true. I just didn't test in the internet, so I am this. Because it really depends on how you're going to use those tools. For example, the love languages I really like, and I really use this too, mainly when you're talking about intercultural relationships, in relationship in general ways, and like even with parents and everything. But it's how we can use those kind of tools. So as a professional, there are a few tools that I can use, like this one, and I can share and I can indicate. But there are other ones that just the client is using, but it's okay, let's bring here, and then we can understand what's the results, what you think about, and about the topic as you said, and then you work through that. And then what she said is really important about the moment. Even though when you talk about positive psychology, you have like the values tests, and then you're going to see like sometimes when you have your strengths, and even though that when you answer the test is really based on the area of your life you're in mind at the moment, what's happening around. So this can change through the life or through the moment, and it's a really useful tool. So it's important for us as a therapist to understand everything has moments and context. Then we can use during the therapy in the sessions.
I really like how you guys brought up the different kinds of tests, and the personality trait is so true. Like, depending on the year, depending on your like influences, you could be an introvert one moment, you could be an extrovert, you could be like a leader, you could be like, it changes so much depending on what your environment is and everything. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting. And buzzwords, like, do you guys like them? Like, like Stephanie said, like the people who don't like sounds and everything. I learned that word as well. I learned it on a podcast, and I was like, oh damn, like I also don't like those noises, but I feel like some noises of course annoy everybody, like people drinking, like you hear like people drinking or eating. And I was like, yeah, I can imagine that could be really annoying. But like the word like trauma, everybody used the word trauma without knowing the word trauma meant. Like, that's that, like when people come up to you and say like, I have trauma, I have like, they're diagnosing themselves like, I got trauma, anxiety, PTSD. It's great that it's Like it is words that it is used in the mental health wording and therapy sessions and everything. Do you try to educate the patient to kind of say, hold up, like, let's go through all these words to kind of say, do you really have trauma or not? Or
Yeah, this is really interesting because not just with those words, but the different words too. I really like to work with them, what they mean to them when they bring it. For example, just to explore, I worked with a couple a time ago, and they are searching for the same goal. Say they have, they want to get a good communication. They get a better boundary between both. But for one, this means one thing, and for the other one, it means something completely different. So for one, the relationship was by, okay, so we both live it together. Our life is just about our both. And the other one's like, oh no, the commitment means I'm with you, I trust you, but I can have friends, I can have a family, and I can have everything, and even though I'm with you. So it was the same word, like the commitment, but for both had completely different meanings. So when you talk about those, of course, like we are going to have a dictionary meaning for that, but doesn't mean that this is the same meaning for the person. Doesn't means that culturally talk is going to be the same meaning. And one thing that's really important is about the intensity, like how I can feel that. So, for example, when you said about the noise, okay, there are few noise that's going to bother, but it's when it's going to be dysfunctional. And this is the difference when you get some disorder. Is not about feel anxious. It's about this being dysfunction that's really affecting other areas of our life and everything. So this is a really important point to look at when you think about this. And then everything you're going to work with the words and what this means for the client. At least like in my work, I really try to understand what they understand about what they are bringing, or even mainly the anxiety, for example, like, okay, but how is anxiety for you? How you feel anxiety? How this affects your day? What the kind of thoughts you have when you're doing that? And then sometimes they're just bringing something like completely out of the DSM aspects, and but for them it's the way they are bringing anxiety. It's just sometimes just the stress, or just when you talk about social media, like a lot of information just overwhelmed with everything. So it's not about how they're dealing with their own emotions, just about everything's around it and it's happened. So it's just too many information. So it's hard to do. It's not something they're not being able to do. It's just hard to deal with normally.
yeah, like that's interesting when you said dysfunctional, like, yeah, like the intensity of like, yeah, how intense that becomes. And it, like, yeah, that's the interesting thing is like all these words are so it seems so playful on social media. So like a lot of people are like, I relate to that, I relate to that. And and they start self-labeling themselves like, I think I have this, I think I have that. So like, I guess like if they are concerned, like who is the best person to talk to? Like, is it the doctors? Should it be the, like, you guys, a specialist? Like, how long does it take to kind of diagnose like somebody? And if they are forward and say, can you diagnose me now? Like, like how long does it take to say, like, I think I might have ADHD, or I don't know, something like that. How would you guide somebody who's going through that rabbit hole?
Well, I just wanted to touch on trauma and the definition, because Argentina, she said it very clearly that it's an emotional response to a situation that could have been distressing or stressful for you. And it's causing you to have some difficulties coping outside of your normal range of responses. So when we're noticing that, usually the person will reach out once they're a little bit settled, not in the height of their trauma. Again, it depends on the situation. It could still be fresh in their mind, and they're just needing someone to work things through so that they can have an understanding of why this situation or this distressful event affected them in that manner. And you're right in terms of the intensity of the situation, because, some of us could watch, for example, a scary movie and, it doesn't affect us. But then if you are that type of person that wasn't really expecting that you would see something that distressing, it will affect you. And I might not think that I may have a reaction. And that's why we talked about people having varying degrees of incidences that cause them to have some type of response. And once we're able to talk through how it affected them, then we can get on some type of plan that could help them alleviate some of that distress. For me to say how long it's going to take, I don't know. Sometimes I apply some intervention, which could be a modality. For example, I use a lot of CBT, cognitive behavioral. So we're looking at how things affect your thoughts and your behaviors and your emotions. So for some people, just talking about it in a couple of sessions, it reduces the intensity and they might not have that much of a reaction. But for some people, it could impact them over their lifetime. So they might need more time to get through it. It's just so hard to put a timestamp to say in 6 months you're going to be cured or it's not going to affect you. I think the intensity will be reduced. But in terms of getting over it, and I'm putting that in quotations, that takes time. And people heal in so many different ways. So I just like to talk about the intensity, just like Argentina talked about, and how to reduce some of that intense emotion so it doesn't affect them over a longer period of time. I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, that totally helps because like I believe like a lot of people they go through that rabbit hole of like not knowing how far to take these things, and I guess I guess like you said, if it bothers somebody so much, talk to somebody. It could be the doctor or one of you lovely ladies here, to just kind of say like I think I have this label, and I'm not sure like if you could talk more about it. And for me, like if I'm correct on the label, I'll probably be like not embracing it, but it's a great awareness thing that like Argentina says, like it's a really good way of like, oh, I'm different because of this. And it could be a nice education piece. So like, do you guys think that self-labeling is wrong? Maybe not the word wrong, but would it be something like it could be a good way to start a conversation with if you are concerned with?
I think when you talk about the labeling, I think important thing is it's more how I can look for those things not as a limitation, but as opportunity. Like even though anxiety, so I saw a lot of symptoms, I sit myself, then I can have anxiety. So okay, let's understand this more. Let's bring how this affect me, why this affect me. So when you go for this look of curiosity and not a limitation, I think it's good to work as Stephanie said. Like really depends the way of people it's going to look, and it really depends even though as a therapist is going to approach this, because it's like okay, so I said you have anxiety, so this is the way you're going. Like no, okay, even though if you have the diagnosis and having the anxiety or have this, so let's look each symptoms. How you're going to work with this one? How would you like to be flexible about that? How would you like to change that? Even though sometimes you have it, it doesn't mean that you're going to be stuck there on this inside of this frame. It's going to be there. Like when you talk about the CBT, a lot about the thoughts. So a lot of people that have depression for a long time or something, they're not going to really stop to have negative thoughts. They're just going to find ways to not dig in on that. So sometimes I did a work, it's not good, or get a bad review, and then the first thought was going to you're not good. And then when they said we are not stop, no come, was just one thing, stop doing that. So it's not about not having it, it's just the way you're going to deal with those thoughts, deal with those behaviors and those kind of things. So this is the work that we are going to do through that. So it's exactly, so it's hard to say it's not wrong, but it's how I can use it in my favor or in the favor of the client. So this is it's the big point when you do that, because they came as a base, I would say. So okay, so you identify yourself with anxiety. It's a start point. Good. So let's go work through that to see if it's really that, or maybe something else. It's something really about your personality, about something else, or just a situation that they're living now, and what we can do with that, how you can improve your well-being through that. Yes.
Yeah. And, I was thinking about this, and now I'm like, okay, it could be considered a cognitive distortion, self-labeling, because you're taking one part of yourself and applying it to the whole parts of you. For example, you failed a test, and then instead of just looking at it as that part of the situation, that who knows what could have happened that day. You didn't study, or you didn't get enough sleep. There could have been so many factors while you failed the test. But instead of putting those factors in, you're saying, well, I failed, so I'm a loser, or I'm a failure. And when we do that overgeneralizing, then we have to look at, where's the evidence that you are a total failure in everything that you do? I mean, it could just be at that time things didn't work out. So then what would be the more balanced perspective? And I would have to say to the person, similar to what you're saying, Argentina, that yeah, we can't just apply it to everything that's happened to you, but let's just break it down and let's figure out what happened at that time to cause you to have that identification. But it doesn't mean that that's who you are. It's just something that happened to you at that time. I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
No, exactly. And this, like I said, like before, is when it's about talk about self-labeling, is not just about this diagnosis. It's exactly this kind of beliefs that I put from to myself about the way I think, the way I feel, the way I behave. It's so because we're getting like the big names, but it's not just about these big names. There are few things that I feel thought that's coming from the distortions. That's exactly.
Absolutely. And other aspects, whether it be the trauma or the childhood patterns, or maybe it's learned behavior. We've heard this somewhere growing up, and then we think that it's just part of who we are. And we're saying that, yeah, those things change in cycles and I guess ages and over time. So yeah, those things, we would see that evidence. Absolutely.
And also, like back to your question, if we think that self-labeling is a good thing. So I've been thinking about it, and I think it's a good step. It feels like a good step towards the direction of more self-awareness. Like I feel like overall we are becoming more self-aware and questioning ourselves. Like, I saw this or read about this, and it's like questioning ourselves, like also reflecting and contemplating and wondering who we are how we are doing, or why we do what we are doing, and how we feel about certain things. So it can bring up like this quest for wanting to understand oneself better, which is, I think, great, because it leads to more self-awareness. And with everything in the world, like with everything, it's always the balance. There's always we can overdo everything, right? And so when becoming curious and wondering about ourselves, like, oh my, that might be anxiety. Like I myself, like as an example, when I was very young, now I know I had social anxiety, but in Austria, in German language, we do not have the wording anxiety. So and back then there was not as much awareness around those things. And later on, as an adult, I understood, okay, that was anxiety actually. I did not know I had anxiety when I was so young. And so it helps to become more aware, creates more awareness, and also like knowing what you all were saying, like not to over-identify with it. Like I'm struggling with that. What can I do? And what kind of tools can I what do I need to do? Like there are wonderful tools we can use, and that's when like professional help can really, really, really be supportive.
Stephanie, you said it so well. Like I don't even need to conclude this like chat, because I think that was perfect. What all three of you have said makes so much sense. Like self-labeling, it could be dangerous, but it brings the awareness to the word, curiosity, and also, if you're really curious and you want to talk to a professional, it's best to talk to somebody like Stephanie, Argentina, or Alethia to talk about what you might be thinking, and because they know all about these different kinds of diagnoses, and they could guide you to kind of settle those feelings down and go through them and say, maybe let's talk about those things. So I love what you guys brought to the table, and it was amazing. Thank you so much to all three of you, and thank you for joining.
This was so much fun. And I just want people just to have a quick reminder, be gentle to yourself. And when you're recognizing these things, it's great to be aware. And like Sally said, investigate and be curious, but also have some nurturance for yourself and say, hey, even though there might be something that I've discovered, I know now that I can lead myself in the right direction by furthering my education and reaching out to people like us to support you in helping you find those answers.
Mm-hmm. And we can all change. It's like change is so hard, but I see it. You all probably see it. What it happens, we can all change. It's lots of work, and it takes time, but we can change.
That was beautiful, ladies. Thank you again. Bye.
Mm-hmm. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
PsyMood is an online mental health platform that connects you with mental health specialists who speaks your language and understand your culture. You can find us at our website at PsyMood.com and on our social media channels on Instagram, X, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn at PsyMood. Don't forget to follow, like, and share, and comment. Thank you for existing.